Hello, welcome to the People Profit Podcast, the show where we flip the script on traditional business thinking and prove that when you put people first, profits follow. I'm Sandra Coker, your guide on this journey to more engaged teams, loyal customers, and a healthier bottom line. These episodes are brought to you by Human Power Solutions, helping organizations unlock the human potential that powers performance. Whether you're a leader, an HR pro, or a curious change maker, buckle up. We're diving into fresh stories, real-world strategies, and a few laughs along the way. Ready to turn your workplace into a profit-powered people machine? Let's get started. Today, I am so thrilled to welcome a guest who's mastered the art of leading under pressure, both in the battlefield and in the boardroom. Nate Tutas is a former U.S. Marine whose leadership foundations were forged in decentralized command, empowering teams to think and act on their own within a clear vision. After in the Corps, he dove into neuro-linguistic programming, blending that belief in unlimited human potential with a hard-nosed commitment to accountability. Yes, I said accountability. Over the years, Nate has coached hundreds of leaders, teaching them to own their systems, not blame their people, leverage scorecards as progress tracking tools, and break the silence before it becomes a business destroyer. His triumvirate model, leading, coaching, and selling, has helped organizations from startups to Fortune 500s unlock performance in surprising ways. Today, Nate's here to share his stories and tactics you can put into practice immediately. We'll explore how Nate translated battlefield lessons into high-trust civilian teams, a concrete example of shifting mindset through NLP to boost performance, the recipe for building measurement tools that motivate, not demoralize, why speaking up early stops gossip, conflict, and lost revenue. And we're all about profiting over here. And lastly, navigating the toughest conversations with empathy and clarity. By the end of our conversation, you'll have fresh tactics for leading from the front, aligning vision with personal purpose, and fostering a culture where everyone feels empowered to excel. So grab your notebook and let's get started. Hi, Nate. How are you doing today? Welcome.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to have you on, being part of the mastermind group, that the international mastermind group that we belong to. I had the privilege of spending time with you at our last meeting in June and really getting to know you. And honestly, you were a little intimidating to me at first. I'm like, who is this guy? He's so smart and so, and you're so kind, which I didn't really get until we met, had spent some time together.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Every once in a while, I've still got the haircut from the Marine Corps and whatnot. So people can feel a little intimidated and then.
Pretty easy going. Yeah, absolutely. You have a beautiful family. Yeah. So I wanted to get started just talking a little bit about the foundations, your leadership foundations coming from that decentralized command in the Marines. Can you walk us through what decentralized command is and what that means in today's leadership world? And then is there a specific situation that you've applied to a civilian team? What kind of impact does that have on the civilian team?
Yeah, so decentralized command is something that's taught throughout the U.S. military. It's really taught significantly. I know the experience, obviously, from the Marine Corps, but I know the Navy uses it, the Army, the Air Force, everybody kind of uses it. And it really comes from the leadership lessons. From my understanding, it comes from the leadership lessons we learned during Vietnam, right? During Vietnam, we had very top-down leadership authority. I mean, if you read some of the books, some of the stories from that era, there's literally guys that will talk about how McNamara, when he was the Secretary of Defense, was holding up missions because he was waiting to get his approval from the Pentagon for them to step off, right?
Oh, okay.
And when you think about like the speed of combat and the way that things move, right, and the speed of communication from way back then, it's insane to think that they even thought that was a good idea, right?
Yeah.
So now we completely shifted the model, and it's primarily based off of decentralized command, which essentially means that there's an order that's given from the top of this is what we need to get done. But then instead of them saying this is how you're going to do that, they leave that up to the person next in line to them to figure out how they're going to get that done, right? So you end up with from the very top, a general can provide an order and it'll trickle all the way down to where when the Marine, that's the boots on the ground, so to speak, right? The infantry, which is what I was, they're going to lance corporals, even privates and private first class and saying, okay, you need to take that building. What's your plan? What's your strategy? How are you going to do it? Right. And so we as 18, 19, 20-year-old kids are figuring out how we're going to go and do that based off of what we've been trained on, giving feedback to the leadership and saying, this is our plan, guiding us through it. And then they're saying, okay, go execute. Right. And that all happens very, very rapidly. And what it allows is a speed of execution that really can't be beat, right? Because we're not waiting for permission on a lot of stuff. A lot of systems in place to make sure we know exactly how to provide orders and all that kind of stuff, and to report back up the chain of command to make sure that there's a solid flow. But that kind of foundational learning, right? When I got into the civilian world and I transferred out of the military into civilian leadership, it was very easy to see that that was a way that I could empower my team. And then what happens there is your team ends up taking responsibility instead of you being the one who's like, well, I have to take, and there's kind of a dichotomy here, right? Because you have to take ownership of the result, but you empower them to go take the action.
I love that. I love that. We're actually practicing that right now. I love hearing that, because it is so hard when you have to deal with, you think about the bureaucracy. My husband works for a very large company, and anything that needs to get done is going to go up. It's just so hard to get anything done.
Yep.
So let's talk about in your business, right? So talk about how you utilize that within your team. So give us some specific examples of what you mean by that, and what impact does it have on the team itself, on their morale, on their buy-in, on their excitement about working with you?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is we kind of follow the similar model to the military. So we develop a standard operating procedure for just about everything, right?
Yeah.
But I'll provide the concept of, hey, here's what I'd like to see happen. Here's what I'd like to see get done. And I'll provide, here for me is the DOD, or the definition of done, right? And so I'll know when this is done and this is complete when these things happen. Go, right? And then my team is empowered to figure out, when do they want to fit it into their schedule? How do they want to go about it? Documenting the process and then building that into our catalog of SOPs so that if anybody ever has to do that again, they can go in and refine that process or simply execute on it, right? Without me dictating down, here's step 1, here's step 2, and so on and so forth. So it gives them ownership of the process, and they know at the end, if this is the definition of done, I just have to figure out, here's where we are, here's where we're trying to get to, and what are my steps in between, and then they're empowered to go execute.
I love that. I love that. We work with virtual teams. You do as well. Developing SOPs is so important. And I know I do a lot of training on video. So I will share my screen so they have a library of those kinds of things and exactly what to do. It saves a ton of time. For sure.
Yeah. One of my favorite tools for that is Loom.
Yeah.
It literally has, if you pay for the AI upgrade, it'll prompt you and say, do you want to create a SOP from this video? And you click the button and it prints it all out for you. So we follow a very similar process where if I have something I need to have done that I'm training the team on, right, I'll go in and film myself doing it. And then I'll say, okay, here's the SOP. So here's the visual, here's the written, go ahead and execute on it. And if you see a better way of executing this, right, go ahead. But we know what the definition of done is, and we know what the end result needs to look like.
Oh, that's good. I have the upgraded version. I haven't used that yet. So I'm going to check that out for sure.
Yeah, it works really well, especially because it gives you kind of that starting point. Yeah. And it's literally, you click a button and it prints it all out for you. So
awesome. So let's talk a little bit about NLP, right? The unlimited potential. That's fascinating to me. It's a term that I hadn't heard before. I didn't know much about it, right? Mm-hmm. So, you couple those military principles with NLP's belief in unlimited potential. Tell us of your time when shifting your language or mindset helped to unlock someone else's performance in a way that was meaningful for them.
Yeah, that's a good question, because there's so many examples of when that actually is the case, because what most people don't realize, and it's really the core foundation in NLP. So NLP is neuro-linguistic programming, right? So the common phrase is that linguistics is our middle name, right? And what a lot of people don't realize is that we process the world around us through our 5 senses, right? We see it, we hear it, we feel it, we taste it, we smell it, right? And when we communicate using that terminology. So based on how someone is actually speaking, we can tell if they're seeing something visually in their mind, if they're
Yeah.
hearing something auditory through their ears, right? Or if they have a kinesthetic feeling, right? Um, and all of those things come into play. So if you're trained on it and you know how to assess the language, you can hear when someone actually says, "Oh, I feel this way about this thing," right? And so when you pick up on those things, people will say, "I see it this way." And where we get a lot of misdirects in communication, so to speak, is when someone will say, "I see it this way." And then the other person will respond and say, "Well, it sounds to me like blah, blah, blah." Right. And they
Mhm.
just shifted what level they were communicating on. So in the brain, it creates a natural friction because the person who's seeing it isn't hearing it. And the person who's speaking about what they hear isn't communicating back to the person what they see in that image. Right.
Yeah. Interesting.
So there's a lot of things that we can do just through communication, right? Where we can actually change the images and we can change the auditory and do all those kinds of things to create a completely different neurological response.
Huh.
There's a lot of times where someone will be speaking about a voice that they hear. I just heard myself say, and it's like, oh, interesting. So where does that voice actually come from? And you usually, if you go through the entire process, they can figure out there's actually a location where they hear it in their mind. They'll be like, oh, it's kind of over my right shoulder here or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And some of our techniques that we can use, there's a plethora of them, but some of them is literally just changing the voice, right? And we'll say, well, what if that voice, instead of it being your voice, it was like Daffy Duck talking really funny or whatever, right? But what happens when you do that is it literally changes the way that your brain processes the information and then allows you to choose a different result. So it's all about choice and being able to choose the direction you want to go and then taking that direction.
That's amazing. And I think, yeah, I mean, you did that for me at one of our tables when I was talking about something that I wanted to start. And you were just like, you have everything you need. What are you waiting for? It was one of those moments I was like, oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
It's really impactful. That's so basically you're learning to ask the right questions so that you don't shift the conversation to something else. You're keeping them in that lane so they can shift their own voices to
Yeah.
reach the goal that they're looking for. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. Yes. So depending, right? If we want to help them achieve that objective, then we do that. If it's a negative loop pattern, then we can intentionally change it so that we create what's known as a pattern interrupt, which
Sure.
in marketing speak, we would refer to it as a hook or anything like that, right? But when you interrupt the pattern, that allows you then to insert new programming, so to speak, right? So
Yes.
I can interrupt the pattern and then intentionally say something different that gets your brain going in a different direction.
I love that. So those people with imposter syndrome or low confidence or whatever that case may be, maybe learning about this and kind of practicing these kind of techniques can kind of help them get unstuck
Yeah.
and move into their where they need to go.
Yep. Yeah. So when you get into the language side of it, right? One of the ways that we frequently find that people will speak and find that they're stuck is they'll actually take a word that's a verb and they'll turn it into a noun, right? And so what happens there is you take a verb that's based on action and you
Mhm.
turn it into a noun, which is a still thing. It's a place or a thing, right? So the common example that we find in business is when people talk about communication, right?
Right.
Communication is a noun. It's a thing. It's a thing that happens. But when we talk about how we would want to communicate, that then turns it back into a verb and then you can actionize it.
Love that. That's awesome.
Something that we frequently find with leaders when we go into work with them from a business context, they'll
Yeah.
be talking about, oh, we need better communication. And it's like, well, have you defined for your team what that sounds like, what that looks like, what that would feel like if you communicated in a different way, right?
Yeah.
And then you find that when they say we need better communication, the other person takes that and translates that in their head of whatever that means for them. So it
That,
might mean a 50,000 page email because they communicated every single detailed point. And you
right.
have a high D leader that's like, geez, I just wanted a quick voice note that said, here are the 3 things we're working on, right?
Right.
So when you communicate it effectively, that's when you really get change and you can really speed up and accelerate those things.
I love we hear that all day long. Like whenever people call us, we don't have any communication, and that's really very interesting concept. I love that. Now I'm going to shift a little bit. So in your bio and the things that that we've discussed prior to this, we talk about leaders versus employee failure, right? And one of the things that you talk about is that 99% of the time it's leaders, not employees, who drop the ball. And that's, I think, due to lack of clarity, lack of purpose, lack of goals, right? And can you just share an example of when you might have caught yourself blaming a system rather than a person, right? Because that's usually what it is, and how
Mhm.
you fixed it.
Yeah. So it happens more often than I care to admit. But it's basically any time there's a great book by Jocko Willink called Extreme Ownership, right? And it's the whole premise is that you take complete and total ownership of the result.
Mhm.
And I learned that back in the Marine Corps because we practiced extreme ownership on everything that we did. But it's where essentially anytime something doesn't work out the way that you want, the very first question you have to ask is not what did this person do wrong? Why did they screw it up? All those kinds of things.
Yeah.
You have to say, okay, what information did I not provide them? Right? What guidance did I not share with them? Many times when my team comes back and they don't have things done the way that I want,
Yeah.
I have to look back and go, okay, when I gave them the definition of done, was I really clear in what done actually meant and what that all consisted of? Or did I give them such a high level explanation that it was like, we have a document in place. Great. What's the document supposed to consist of? I have to detail that out a little bit for them. Right. So for me, it happens all the time. I'll share an example of where recent one, I had my virtual assistant putting together a social media plan. Right. And she had the whole thing done, completed everything in our project management software. And she sent me a note and said, hey, everything's completed. It's ready to go. Whenever you want to, like, go ahead and just approve it and I'll start posting stuff. And I was like, okay, great. I went into the program and I didn't even have access to it. So I couldn't
Oh,
see anything. So it was technically done, right? But we were off hours. So she was off for the rest of the day. And I'm sitting there going, well, I can't approve this. I need access. So simple little thing like that,
uh-huh.
I needed to take ownership of, hey, I should have said, hey, once you get this completed, you're building it in the background. You need to give me access to it so I then can see it and approve it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
an easy example of I could have said, well, why didn't she think of that herself? Right. When she go through that process and she knows I need access in order to look at it and approve it, I could have easily blame shifted and said it was her problem.
Right.
But really, if I never communicated to her that I can't see it in the first place, there's an assumption there and I have to go back and make sure I correct it.
Yeah, and I think so. I used to be a very high level, like, oh, they'll figure it out, or here's a goal that we have, and just go here, 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 and here, and I'll just kind of be done, and then get frustrated when things aren't done the way that I want them to be done. And learning that, I think, especially in this podcast, we really talk a lot to the newer managers and newer leaders that are up and coming. I think some of these lessons are really important to as a leader, you've got to take some ownership. And this actually happened to me just yesterday. One of my assistants to do something for me, and last night, and we're off hours as well. And last night I went in to just make sure it was done, because that's some kind of a control freak that way. And it wasn't. And I was like, what the heck? So I did it. And then just shot him a note saying, hey, don't worry, I took care of this. And, his comment to me was, I don't communicate over there. We need to, if you need something done right away, this is where I look. And, it was that was my fault, right? Because I wasn't clear on where we should be going.
The other thing that's coming to mind right now is just the dichotomy between what we talked about right at the beginning and what we're talking about right in this moment, which is decentralized command, right? Because those can be situations where the definition of done, it's very easy to become controlling and to step in and give every single little thing that they have to do, right? But for me, the decentralized command part of it is to look at it and go, okay, this is a training opportunity, right? So I can go through the process with my virtual assistant and say, okay, so when you get done with the process, how do we make sure that we give access to the other person, right? And then they can go through and make that part of their actual SOP and make sure it's communicated in the right way. Because otherwise, I dictate what they need to do. And then the next time they go to do it, they're still waiting for me to dictate down the next step. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. I love that. You talk about the triumvirate of leadership: leadings, number one; coaching, two; and selling. Those three pieces are part of leadership. Which of the three do you find most counterintuitive for new managers? And how would you kind of coach them through that?
I think counterintuitive for most managers, I would say, is probably the selling part.
Okay.
And for me, they're completely interchangeable, right? Because if I'm leading, then one of the first things I need to do is actually sell you on the vision, right? And selling isn't manipulating you, right? It's not tricking you into making a decision, right?
Yeah.
It's helping you to see the bigger picture and the vision and to get your buy-in, right?
Yeah.
So once I do that, you can make a decision of, am I bought into that idea or not? Right. And that's where, for me, sales leadership and coaching are really one and the same, because if we're leading, we're selling people on the vision, right? If we're coaching people, then it's very similar to leading and to selling, in the sense of you're asking questions to help them come up with the actual answer and the actual response. Right. The worst thing from a sales perspective is to sit there and try to say, okay, I'm going to sell you this thing because I think it's right for you. You have to ask questions and figure out, is now the right time? Like, what's the reason you really need to make a change? Does it make sense to actually do that? Is now really the right time for you to make that change? Yes or no? And then, am I the right person to help you make that change? Right.
Yeah.
So,
and I love that, because like so many managers are like, or some people say we're not salespeople, but every single day we're pitching ideas. We are getting buy-in. It's not selling per se to buy a widget, but it's the vision of where you want to go, and taking everybody with them, and what's in it for them, when they buy into that journey.
Yeah, it's persuasion and influence is really what it boils down to. And you used one of my favorite phrases, because it's something my dad taught me on really, really early. He said, everybody's tuned into their own radio station, WIIFM. What's in it for me? That's all they want to know.
That's my favorite. So with a new manager, someone that's newer, or, had never really heard this concept before, what advice would you give to them to kind of figure out how to motivate and get people on board? Because I feel like new managers are like, and I've said this before many times, like, congratulations, you're a new manager. Now nothing's about you, right?
Yeah.
Everything's about your team. I think that's a hard concept for people.
Yeah, it is. I think the interesting thing is trying to figure out the difference between, like, you lead, you serve, and that allows you to grow, right? So if you're leading, you're applying coaching techniques, you're applying sales, persuasion, influence, right, to get people bought into your vision. But one of the biggest things, like you just said, the with them concept, right, is how do you actually tie that person's individual goal of what they want to achieve and what they want to accomplish to the bigger goal of the company, the bigger goal of the team, whatever that is, right? That creates that driving force for them to say, oh, by helping the team to accomplish this goal, I in turn accomplish my goal, right? And a case in point experience that I had when I was first moved into sales management, I had those types of conversations with every single person on my team. It was, what's your goal? What are you trying to accomplish? And they would immediately go to, oh, well, the quota for the quarter is this. And I would go, no. Personal. What do you want to actually have happen? Right. And I had an individual that had been working for that company since he was 18. So he had been working there for 32 years at the time.
Wow.
And I had to literally coach him through, because he kept going back to the business thing. I'm like, no. What are you trying to accomplish? And he's like, well, one thing I've always dreamt about, I don't think it could ever happen, but the thing I've always dreamt about is my wife and I love taking our RV and going camping. And usually those trips are like a 3-day weekend here, a 3-day weekend there. I would love to have where I could just take the month of July off, right? And just go do that. And I was like, okay, well, let's reverse engineer the math to figure out what you need to do. So we figured out, based on where he needed to be quota, we figured out the percentage increase he needed every month so that he got ahead of his quota. So he could literally just take the month of July off, and we could leave him alone and go, well, he's going to be on pace when he gets back, right? Yeah. And then we also looked at, when you get back, you're going to have to kind of get that initial momentum going again. So what's the plan? We put the plan together, and someone who had struggled to hit quota many years in a row, so he was just at the line where it was okay, the team was willing to accept it, so to speak. He blew through his quota within a couple of weeks. And he actually came back to me and said, Nate, honestly, I've been at this company 32 years. No one has ever asked me that question. No one has ever tried to figure out what I wanted to accomplish personally. And I remember when he said that,
wow,
I was like heartbroken for him, because I was like, to be at a company where they don't care about your personal goals and what you're trying to achieve, I'm like, that, to me, why would you stay? Right? Yeah. So I think if you can tie those things together to what they're trying to achieve in their personal life, whether that's financial freedom, time freedom, health, fitness, whatever, right? Yeah. And then bring that back and connect the dots. That's how you lead. That's how you serve. That's how you connect those things and then help to move forward.
Running a business is hard. Developing your people shouldn't be. At Human Power Solutions, We act as your outsourced chief learning officer, designing custom learning and development experiences that actually move the needle. No fluff, no cookie cutter workshops, just results. Whether your people need better communication, stronger leadership, or less burnout, we provide strategic solutions that align with your goals and keep your team moving forward. Visit hpowersolutions.com and unlock your team's full potential without disrupting operations.
I love that. So many people, like, they lack belief in themselves, or they think that the goal is too big and the vision is too big. And what an impact you had on that gentleman. And what a game changer that is. Because I'm sure when he took that month of July off, he's like, well, what's next? Right?
Yep. But I went from being this young gun sales manager where I was the youngest person coming through. My dad was actually the president of the company. So there was a little bit of that of like, oh yeah, you just got the job because your dad was the president type thing. And the closest person in age to me was 13 years my senior. Right. So I had a little bit of an uphill battle as a new manager, getting the belief and getting, like, I had people that were like, are you serious? Like, you really want to know what it is I want? And I'm like, yes, I truly want to know. I genuinely care. Right.
Yeah.
After this individual was able to hit that goal, it was like the belief was there from every single person. And when we had a new salesperson come on, they would tell that story, and it solidified me as the manager from that point.
I love that. And that's a whole other podcast, is being a young manager and leading people that are older. My first management job ever with Marriott, company that I absolutely adored working for. I was 21, I think, coming out of college, and I'd been working for them. I worked for Marriott in college. And so they said, come and work for us full time now that you're out. And I was in healthcare, and my first direct report, my first two direct reports were in their 60s. So yeah, it was just, it took working side by side. It took like them getting to know me personally, and it's really a challenge. That's a whole other podcast. About that.
We could literally spend like 4 hours just on how do you manage that gap?
Yeah, it is. It's hard. But proving yourself is huge. Yeah. One of the things that you talk a lot about is accountability, and accountability is, holding people to what they've said they're going to do, and also holding you and your company to your goals. And you talk about scorecards and how they're under leveraged, and that progress, not the number itself, is key. Can you walk us through setting up, like helping people set up a high impact scorecard, and how you would track those progress moments, not just the end result?
Yeah. So one of the things, like when we talk about the definition of done, right? I think a lot of times one of the reasons that people don't execute is they just don't know exactly what it is that they're supposed to do. There's a lack of clarity there, right? So if you develop a scorecard, you have to keep it fairly minimal, right? Like I always recommend like 3 to 5 main things that you're working on. If you can condense it down to 3, that's ideal. If you have to expand it to 5, that's okay, right? But once you actually build that out and you look at things like knowledge on the job, do they actually know how to do the things that they're actually trying to do, right?
Yeah.
You look at that, and as a leader, if we go back earlier of taking the onus and the responsibility, if that person doesn't know how to do their role, right?
Yeah.
Whose fault is that? Is that the company's fault because they didn't provide the training? Is that your fault as the leader for not assessing where the company's training was at versus where this person was at when you hired them, and what needed to be put in place to bridge the gap?
Yeah.
You look at things like motivation. Do they want to do the job that they're doing? Again, you go back to ownership. Do you just expect, like, you can't necessarily give someone motivation, but can you help them to tie their goals and align it in a way that they go, hey, you know what? This is the right job. This is the right role. This is the right company for me to be at because it helps me to actually achieve my goals.
Right.
All right. That's something even in the hiring process, I always considered when we were hiring new candidates, because I would ask what their goals were and try to start forming that conversation right at the beginning. Because for me personally, one of the big red flags when you're hiring is if I can't figure out how to help you achieve your goal through the role and position I'm hiring for, then I'm fighting an uphill battle from day one, right?
Yes.
So if you can assess those things and you can start looking at those things and different metrics that actually have to do with the person's individualistic role and whatnot, right? combine a couple of those, then you can actually look and say, okay, are we doing a good job? And I think scorecards go both ways. There's the scorecard for the leader related to that individual, and then there's scorecard for the individual, because
Gotcha.
kind of that dichotomy where both have to take ownership, right? So one of the things I have in place with my team is they give me a score on everything at the end of the week. And did I communicate effectively enough for what they needed? Because if they come back and give me a low score, that's a signal to me of, hey, I need to do a better job at making sure they know the definition of done, right?
Yeah.
And so I think if you have that kind of duality and you make it very, very clear, which means as a leader, you also have to kind of check your ego. And if they give you a low score, you can't be like, what do you mean you're giving me a 2? Like,
Right.
I communicate perfectly. It's your fault.
Yeah.
Right. But if you do that and they know that there's a two-way communication, then it becomes a team effort for everybody to excel and get better. Right. And I think one of the challenges I see in a lot of corporations is if they do use scorecards, they use scorecards for the individual to say you're performing or you're not performing, but they don't change that scorecard and have it go the other way. Right. It's a blind survey that is just kind of put out there. And it's like, well, how honest are people with that? If they do say they didn't get the right communication or they didn't communicate properly, there's no feedback loop there for them to be able to go and say, okay, help me better understand. How can I do a better job? Those kinds of things.
Right.
So.
But that, it's interesting because a lot of companies have that fear, right, of giving some direct feedback and they stay silent. People will stay silent, right? And in our conversations, you talk about silence is the biggest destroyer in business, right? So has there ever been a time where you've been able to break the silence on an issue that's been kind of like that underlying issue, right? That's just kind of under the surface, but not up yet. And how that conversation prevented either the gossip or the conflict. And why is silence the biggest destroyer?
I think silence is the biggest destroyer is because it's usually related to time, but like time will find a way to fill a vacuum, right? So if you give yourself a block of time, we all know that you'll find something to do in the amount of time. Whereas if you shorten it somehow, you magically get way more done when you just lock yourself in, right?
Yeah.
The same I found is true when it comes to silence in communication from a leadership perspective, right? If you leave that vacuum, someone will figure out a way to fill it, right?
Yeah.
And they'll either figure out a way to fill it with gossip, they'll figure out a way to fill it with truth or whatever. So my perspective has always been, and I come from the military, so I use war type terminology, but my perspective has always been attack the silence, right? If there's an opening, if there's a void, if there's a gap, there's no waiting, there's no beating around the bush, there's no any of that. You simply just step in and say, okay, here's what I'm seeing as the potential problem or challenge. I'm not even sure what the solution is, but how do we fix it? How do we come together as a team? And how do we resolve this? Right. Case in point, you'll see this a lot with different organizations where they don't know from the top, they don't know what they should be doing as it relates to achieving their goal if they end up underperforming. Right.
Right.
So instead of the leader going and saying, hey, here's our plan, here's how we're going to help you to actually shift some of the things you're doing so that you get there, you just end up with someone going, well, I don't know if I'm going to get fired. I don't know if, what's going to happen, So for me, it's always go in there, attack that void, and then fill it and really just be open and honest and say, hey, I'm not even sure what the answer is here, but let's talk through it and figure out what we do together.
Love that. I think that's like tackling things right up front, just getting in there. Because there's a lot of, there is, we're in business because there's just a lot of dysfunctional teams out there. And our goal here is to help to grow the next generation of servant leaders who actually really are serving their clients who are the employees, right? People that are in their organizations. And you talk about leaders must lead from the front, and it kind of brings me to this picture, and I'll see if I can find it, and we'll see if my producer can put it up, but it's the group of people and the leaders from the front, and they've got a whip. And then the next one is like, you should be leading from behind, and getting people to go. What is your feeling about leading from the front? Why is it so important to roll up your sleeves and work alongside your team? And how did you learn that?
Well, I think I learned it from the Marine Corps, right? A lot of the training that we have is that when I say lead from the front, it could easily be interchanged with you lead by example, right?
Yeah.
So in essence, I'm not going to say, hey, you need to take ownership of the situation if I'm not willing to take ownership of it first, right?
Okay.
I'm not going to say you need to be into work early if I'm not into work early myself, right?
Right.
I'm not going to say you need to get in shape if I'm not in shape. So I always look at those kinds of things and say, how can I lead from the front? How can I lead by example? How can I set the tone? How can I set all those kinds of things? Because then if at any point I question it, or I challenge my team on stepping up to that level,
Yep.
they can never point the finger and say, well, you don't do that.
Right.
Right. And so I think that to me is the big difference. It's more, hey, follow me. I'm going to take us over this hill. I'm going to take us through. Right.
Yeah.
And I'll be the one that takes the brunt of the force. Right. All you have to do is execute behind me. Right. Versus saying, hey, you're going to come with me hell or high water. I don't care what you think. And I'm going to whip you into shape to get there. Right.
Yeah. I love that. And I think we can talk about like taking lunch. It's something as simple as taking a lunch where, I'll go into companies or my team will go in and we'll talk like, how many of you guys take a lunch? And people are like, we don't because our boss doesn't. And it's like, and going to those managers saying, you need to set the example because people feel like they can't go or vacation time, which I feel is so important. And somebody is probably laughing right now because I've been lecturing them on taking time up. Because that's where your innovation, like I take my weekends off, I ride my motorcycle, I go hiking or do whatever, because that's the kind of stuff that increases your creative juices and your innovation. If you're continually just working all the time, it's, not to say I don't work hard. I work very late during the week, but I shut down on the weekends and I encourage our staff to do that too. And I feel like people just don't talk about that enough with their employees.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. And I would say even you don't take the lunch. If you're the type of leader that's like, I'm going to push through, we've got a big project going on, whatever. It's okay if you choose to do that, but you need to go make sure that your team is taking the lunch. You need to make sure your team is taking the break. And I forget if it was Simon Sinek that wrote this or if it was another author, but they wrote about a concept that we actually use in the military. And it's really one of the fastest ways that my brain just triggers and gets set off if I see someone else doing this. And I have to keep my mouth shut because it's usually not my fault. But we had a concept in the military that leaders eat last, right? So, they start training you on that directly from boot camp, right? So you see your drill instructors eat, but your drill instructors wait until everybody else is through the chow line before they'll even take any food off the service line, right? Yeah. When you become a squad leader, and you get put in any position of leadership, your very first role and responsibility that they train you on is making sure your team gets their food first. Right.
Yeah.
And I had times I was when I went into boot camp, I was 119 pounds when I graduated. And I was, I was pretty cool. I was pure muscle and bone at that point, but I think I went in at like 130 and still lost like 11 pounds. Like I was like, I don't know how this works, but one of the ways it worked was, I was a squad leader, in my platoon. And so my role was to make sure my entire team got to eat first. And if you know anything about the way the Marines run boot camp, they look for every single little thing to basically ruin your world for, right? So we had certain ways we had to hold our trays. We could only eat with our left hand. We couldn't bring our head forward to get to our food. The fork had to come up and then go into our mouth. Like,
what?
All kinds of things that you're just like, if you're not left-handed, that's a problem, right? And you have guys that are starving and you have a very, very short window to eat. Otherwise, if someone screws up, they'll literally just be like, nope, we don't care how much you ate, everybody out, right? Well, I was what was referred to as a double rat, which meant I got double rations because they were actually trying to get me to gain weight, not lose weight, right? And I would go in because I was squad leader and I would literally get to the point where my butt would literally hover over the seat and someone would have done something and I wouldn't even get to sit down and they would be like, buddy out. And I swear there were times they were just looking for when I sat down, didn't do a thing, just screamed to see if it would set me off. And I would take a full plate of food and just dump it in the trash and just walk out and be like, all right, everybody get on the pull bar, because that's what we had to do. But we had that concept that leaders always ate after their team. So I still, when I'm like, even at the edge, if you watch me, I'll wait until the majority of people, if I'm sat at a table with people, I'll wait until everybody at that table goes through and gets food before I'll ever take a single bite. Right?
That's interesting. Yeah.
when I was leading a team, if we had lunch that was brought in for a meeting or something like that, I made sure everybody had their food before I ever took a single bite. Right. And that to me is a way of showing like, hey, my role is to be of service to you, right? If I'm a leader, my first role is to be of service to you and to make sure you have everything you need to accomplish your job, your task, whatever, right? And part of that is being willing to go to them and say, hey, you're overworked right now. You will take vacation, right?
Yes.
You have the time. You need to get out of here so your brain can actually refresh, right?
Yeah.
To take a walk around the office and say, hey, have you taken lunch yet? No, I haven't. Get out of here, right? Go take a lunch. Heck, take an hour lunch, take a 90-minute lunch, get out of here, right? Whatever that is, I think that shows, because those are the little things that people go, I want to work for that person because they care.
Right.
My other bosses don't care if I take lunch. They just want me to get the work done. My other bosses don't care if I take vacation and relax my brain or spend time with my family. They just want the work done, right?
Yeah.
But I think when we actually care about people, it comes through from that perspective.
I love that. So there's that caring, but then sometimes you have that team member who's not quite, living up to snuff, So you talk about coaching the team up or out. What does that mean, and how long before you get them out?
Oh, that's a good question. Because there's, if you follow Jocko Willink, he's got two main books when it comes to leadership. One is Extreme Ownership, and then the second one is The Dichotomy of Leadership, where he literally is like, here's the situation, and here's the inverse of that situation, because you have to deal with both, right?
Right.
And I think it applies just about everywhere, because just part of leading a team is also making sure that you're also coaching up or out the weakest link all the time, right?
Okay.
Because I think, and it's true, it's proven throughout, but your team is only as strong as your weakest link. So part of what you have to be doing as a leader is saying, hey, for the people who are performing, I'm not willing to accept someone that's underperforming, because one of the fastest ways to ruin a team is to let your team see that it's okay to underperform and to be that person, right? So it's constant vigilance on that. It's constantly challenging the team to work and operate at a certain level. And then it's a balance that you find of how new is the person, how well am I doing with my leadership capabilities, filling the void and communicating with the team and saying, hey, just so you guys know, I understand this person right now is underperforming. I'm working with them to get them up to this level. Here's our time frame. If we can't get to that level by that point, they're aware, I'm aware, you're not sharing that out of context, right?
Right.
But you make sure that the whole team is aware, okay, coach, right? Leader, boss, manager, whomever is taking care of us and making sure that that person's being trained up so that we all perform at a similar level.
Yeah. And that's so important, because sometimes you get them out too soon, where it's just a matter of, it's your fault, right? So it's your fault for not getting them up. But then if they don't come up, then a different decision has to be made. And that's a hard decision to make on the human level, for sure. Yeah. So finally,
I think that comes down to, and this is where you kind of have to find that line, but it's being true with yourself and saying, okay, have I given them the opportunity, right? Have I shortchanged them, so to speak, because I haven't led, I haven't coached, I haven't helped them to kind of coach them up, so to speak, right? But if you're coaching them up and they're just resistant to it, or they're fighting you every step of the process,
right,
then you almost have to revert back to that earlier conversation. Okay, let's revisit your goal and what you're looking to accomplish and make sure this is the right fit, right? And if you assess that it's not the right fit, then obviously that decision has to be made.
Yeah. Yeah. This has been a really great conversation. I so appreciate your time so much. So tell us a little bit about your business and then any final thoughts that you would like to give to our listeners.
Yeah, my business is DAI Success, right? And so my business is all about helping entrepreneurs to get, really for online business, their first or their next 100,000 online, right? And so we're all about the 4 A's of business, as I call it, which are really, whether you're talking corporate America or you're talking smaller entrepreneurs or whatnot, there's really only 4 things you can do in your business to increase your business. You can attract more of your ideal client. You can acquire more of those ideal clients. You can ascend more of those ideal clients or increase lifetime value and things like that. Or you can automate the process, so the whole process flows smoother, faster, quicker, all those kinds of things. So that's really what we're all about at DAI Success, and just helping companies to do that so that they can really grow and scale from that perspective.
They got a lot today. Is there any final thoughts you want to offer to our audience for today?
Look at where you can actually connect the dots on some of the things you may have heard today, right? We covered a lot of ground, from leading by example, how to effectively communicate, right? Understanding the different language patterns and things like that. Talked about leading from the front and talked about, servant leadership and whatnot. So my encouragement to everybody would just be, see where you can actually connect those dots for yourself, right? And then look for a way that you can implement them, because fast action is really where you get results.
And you also talked about some books in here, so we'll drop the links to the books in our description below so that people can go and grab those books. I'm a huge fan of all of what you just talked about, so we're so aligned. And how can people get in touch with you if they want to contact you to find out a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, so social media, obviously, you can connect with me. It's LinkedIn, and just if you look up Nate Tutas, you can find me on LinkedIn, or you can visit our website at daisuccess.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Truly appreciate it. Our audience appreciates it. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of the summer.
Thank you. You as well. Appreciate it.
Thanks. That's a wrap on this episode of the People Profit Podcast. If you found a nugget of wisdom or even just a spark of inspiration, share the love, subscribe, leave us a review, and pass the episode along to a colleague who's ready to build a people-first culture. Big thanks to our sponsor, Human Power Solutions, for championing workplace where humans thrive and profits rise. Want to learn how they can energize your team? Head over to hpowersolutions.com to get started. I'm Sandra Coker, reminding you that when you invest in people, you invest in profit. See you next time.